All right, welcome everyone. We're going to give it a little bit more time to see if a few more people will pop in and join us. But in case you are concerned that you may be at the wrong place, this is the J-1 post-completion academic training information session. So this information will be the most useful for J-1 students who will be graduating hopefully soon. If you are not a J-1 student, this probably won't be super helpful for you. But hopefully everyone here is J1. Should we give it a little bit more time, Monica? Looks like we've a small number here right now.
Yeah, I think we can give it a few more minutes.
A few more minutes, yeah. But just as a quick introduction, my name is Deborah Herlocker-Freeman, and I am a senior international student and scholar advisor. And my interesting point is I am actually based in Seattle. So it is not snowing here. It is gray and cloudy because that's how we do winter, but we don't have snow. And I do work with J1 students as well as F1 students.
And for those who are here, my name is Monica Ray. I'm an international student and scholar advisor in the Office of Global Services. And my fun fact is that I'm based on the other side of the country from Deb. I'm in Portland, Maine, at our Roe Institute campus. And we do have snow on the ground, and it's very cold. So I'm sure you're all cold in Boston too. It's pretty similar to where I am.
Yeah, I saw the groundhog. I think the groundhog saw his shadow, which means more winter. Yeah. Sorry. Our lack of snow, unfortunately, is making a lot of skiers very unhappy over here. I do not ski, so I'm okay, but a lot of people are like, I spent all this money on ski passes, and they can't use them because we're not getting the snow. So there we go. You can feel slightly bad for us. All right. Well, I think let's get started. We might get a few more people who pop in as we go, but just to make sure that we get things done for those people who showed up on time, let's go ahead and get started. So again, you are at the J1 post-completion academic training session. This is aimed at J1 students, probably ones who are going to be completing their program soon and are interested in potentially doing post-completion employment. So first of all, let's talk about where we work. Monica and I work. So we work for the Office of Global Services, commonly known as OGS. There's an acronym for everything here at Northeastern as well as within the government. So the Office of Global Services is a resource, and we work with over 24,000 F1 and J1 international students and scholars from over 140 nations, different nations across the world. The majority of those are based in Massachusetts, but we do have them scattered all across the country, which is why I'm in Seattle, Monica's in Portland, and we've got Miami, California, a few other campuses. So what do? We provide assistance and expertise in helping navigate the complex regulations around F1 and J1 status for students and scholars, and help you maintain your visa status, understand what benefits you are entitled to, and then also pursue your personal academic and career goals. If you have questions or a situation that pops up and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to OGS, how do I do it? These are the best ways to contact us. There is a phone number that you can call. That is in East Coast time. Boston time is usually when you're going to get somebody answering that. I think everyone here is going to be Boston based, so that doesn't matter. There is a website that has a lot of information, so I highly recommend if you have questions, check the website first. And if you feel that your question still isn't answered, then you would go to our inquiry portal. So we have an inquiry form where you can ask questions, but there's also a lot more information in that inquiry portal, service portal. So that is the second place to get information. And the business hours are Monday through Friday, East Coast time, 8:30 a.m. to 5. So again, that's OGS. That's how to contact us. We do exist. We don't disappear after this presentation. All right. But today we are not talking about everything J1. We are just talking about academic training, specifically post-completion academic training. So what is academic training? Also known as AT, because again, acronyms, that's how we roll. So the U.S. Department of State, also known as DOS, which oversees the J-1 Exchange Visitor Program, has regulations that allow J-1 students to apply for an authorization called academic training. This training, this authorization can be used either before graduation or after graduation. We use the term post-completion usually to talk about after graduation. And this presentation will be talking about post-completion AT. So if you have questions about pre-AT, please check out our website and see if that's even something that you'd be eligible for. So academic training is designed to provide J-1 students with employment experience that is directly related to their academic studies, to their field of study as it is listed on their DS 2019. So it is not a separate authorization that is tied to like some other status. It is tied to your J-1 status, to your DS 2019, to your academic studies. I always want to emphasize that academic training is a benefit. It is not a guarantee. Just because you are here in J-1 does not mean that you are automatically entitled to academic training. So the primary purpose of the DS 2019 sent to you and you coming to the United States in J-1 is to pursue a program of study, not employment. The J-1 student category is not an employment category. This means that to be eligible for academic training, there really has to be clear documentation that the experience is strongly tied to what you are studying, which means that for us to authorize it, we would need an offer of eligible employment that meets all J-1 academic training requirements. You have to come to our office, we have to review everything, and then we have to give you written authorization to move forward with that academic training experience before you can start work. It is important to know that the US government is really strict when it comes to unauthorized employment. It's one of the things they really don't like. So you have to be very careful that you do not work off campus without the proper authorization. So even if you've started the process, your offer says you're supposed to start on Monday, if you do not have the appropriate documentation from our office, you cannot start working. If you do start working without the authorization, it can impact your status and future benefits. So please just be aware that that is something that you really need to be careful about. Okay, so who is eligible for academic training? Well, first of all, it is only a benefit for J-1 students. So if you're an F1 student or you're H4 or some other status, you are not going to be eligible. You have to be in J-1 status, and you have to have maintained your J-1 status up until the time that your academic training is supposed to have started. So if you have not maintained enrollment requirements or insurance requirements or other requirements of your J-1 status, you are not going to be eligible for this. Because it is academic training, you do have to be in good academic standing. Or for post-completion, you have to have successfully completed your program of study. If you are not considered to have successfully completed your program of study, you would not be eligible for post-completion AT. It is a training experience that is directly related to your field of study, and your academic advisor has signed off and confirmed that they agree that it is something that is directly related and is a good experience for you. It is important to know, especially if you are hanging out with a lot of F1 students who are talking about OPT, that there are differences on the J-1 side. Academic training is not OPT. It is overseen by the Department of State, and they are very explicit in what they allow in regards to remote employment. They do not allow full-time remote employment academic training. So you cannot do 100% remote academic training opportunity. You can only work remotely 40% of the time. So usually what that means is if you're working 5 days a week, only 2 of those days can be remote. The other days have to be in person in the office. And this is explicitly stated by the Department of State. It's important to remember that because I think a lot of times people are talking to you like friends who might be F1 students and they're talking about OPT, and that is a different situation, overseen by a different department, different regulations. And as with every J-1, you have to continue maintaining the health insurance that meets Department of State requirements. This means that once you've graduated, you have to make sure you are responsible for obtaining that health insurance that meets the same requirements as when you were a student, including the evacuation repatriation. I do want to state, just in case there's anybody here from the London double degree program, that London double degree programs are not eligible for AT. It's not built into the academic experience, and so we're not able to authorize it. If you are a geo exchange student, you are not currently eligible for pre-APT or co-ops before graduation. But again, this discussion, this presentation is all about post-completion AT. All right, so that's the general AT requirements. What about the work? What does the work have to be to meet the requirements? Because if you're out there, you're starting to look for jobs after graduation, you're like, okay, what does it need to do? Well, first, it can be paid or unpaid. Ideally, yes, we'd all love to have paid employment, but if you find an unpaid internship that looks amazing, then that's something that you can potentially pursue using academic training. You do need authorization, even if it is unpaid. The work has to be directly related to your field of study. It has to be commensurate with your level of education. So the way that I've explained that in the future, is like if you're doing a master's degree or PhD degree, and you in computer science, working as a cashier at McDonald's isn't really commensurate with that level of academic experience. So it has to be around, you're using the skills that you just recently learned in your newest degree. As discussed in the previous slides, it cannot be fully remote. So it either has to be fully in person or hybrid with no more than 40% of the time remote. And the total amount of academic training cannot exceed the total length of the academic program. This is where it can get confusing, math gets involved. We're only able to authorize academic training for a certain period of time that the government has allotted. So it cannot be longer than the total length of your academic program. So if you are here as like a geo exchange student for one semester, that means it's going to be a very limited amount of time that you'd be eligible for academic training. When we give you the authorization for academic training, it is not a generic, hey, go off and work, have fun. It is location and date specific. So it will explicitly say you can work for this employer from this date to that date at this location. The location is actually going to be listed on your DS 2019. When we issue the academic training authorization, you get an updated DS 2019, and for post-completion, your site of activity will get changed. So just be aware that when you get that, it is very specific. You can only work at that location for those dates and that name. All right. So here's where the math comes in, and my brain starts to be like, I need another cup of tea. So the time limitations, as I mentioned, it's going to be based upon how long your program was. So if you are a J-1 undergraduate and master's degree student, you are usually eligible for up to 18 months of academic training. It's important to note that there's not a separate pre and post. So when you get off academic training, any time that you do prior to graduation is going to be deducted from what you have able to use after graduation. But example here that we talk about, a master's student who completed their program in 12 months is only eligible for 12 months. So if your program of study in the United States was shorter than 18 months, you are not going to be able to do 18 months of academic training. The academic training period of your DS 2019 cannot be longer than the enrollment study part of your academic, DS 2019. There is a note here so that if you are in a STEM field and you complete a degree in the United States, you may be eligible for an extension. If you are someone who has completed a STEM degree in the United States under J-1 status and you think you might be eligible for this, please contact our office directly. It's still kind of processed on an exception basis with Department of State, so we would need to kind of connect with you and walk you through that. If there is any J-1 doctoral degree students who are here, you are actually eligible for up to 36 months of academic training. Again, this includes any time that you do before graduation, as well as what is after graduation. So for probably the majority of peeps who are here, J-1 non-degree exchange students are eligible for AT equivalent to their program duration, but not to exceed a total program duration of 24 months. So this means that the total academic training period may not exceed the amount of time spent in the full course of study, as I mentioned before. So for example, if you're a geo student who is here, you would need to look at how long your DS 2019 was issued for your studies when you're enrolled in classes part. And that would give you an idea of how long you would be eligible for post-completion academic training. Example given here is a student in a 9-month academic year exchange program at Northeastern would only be eligible for up to 9 months of post-completion AT. A student in a 1-semester program, which is usually about 4 months, would be eligible for no more than 4 months of AT. So that gives you a general idea of like the timelines of what you would be entitled to, eligibility. And I am going, oh, there's still one more slide. I thought I was ready to give it over to Monica. Nope, important consideration. So your post-academic training time begins the day after your program end date. So if your program end date is, let's say, May 8th of 2026, the post-AT time would have to start May 7th, even if you haven't started working. Sorry, May 9th. Yes, I'm doing math. Sorry. I'm like May 8th, May 9th. Yes, May 9th is the day after, or May 8th. So May 9th is when your AT would start, even if you don't start working. It is your responsibility to track the academic training usage. We will often double check, but it is your responsibility. It is important to know that we cannot do academic training after the end date of your DS 2019. So again, if your DS 2019 ends on May 8th, 2026, you must request the academic training with us, and it must be processed by us prior to May 8th. Once May 9th comes along, we cannot do an extension and an academic training authorization. It has to be done prior. And any employment that you begin for academic training has to start within 30 days of when your DS 2019 ends. So what this means is if your DS 2019 ends on May 8th, you would have to have an employer in place and have applied for academic training prior to May 8th. And that employment cannot start later than, I'd have to do math, but probably around like June 6th. So it does mean that, again, if you're talking to like friends who are F1 status, it is different than OPT because you have to have an employer in place and the job has to start within a certain amount of time of when your DS 2019 ends. Another difference is whether you are working full-time or you are working part-time for academic training, it is going to be deducted from the total amount of days at the same rate. There is no, hey, if you're only working 20 hours, that only is like 50% of a day, so it only takes 1 day off. It's going to be the same amount of time. And I'm going to repeat this again. Health insurance has to be maintained for the entire time. So even if you're in those 30 days between when your academic portion has ended, but before your post-AT employment, you have to be insured during that time, even if your employment hasn't started yet in those 30 days. Anytime you're in the US in J-1 status, please, please, please make sure that you have that insurance in place. Okay, I'm seeing Monica now, so I think yes, this time it really is. I forgot that one slide. So I'm going to switch it over to Monica, but as she said, if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A section. We may wait until the end to answer them just because we may answer the questions as we go. But do feel free to put your questions there. And I'm going to be quiet now.
Thanks, Deb. So Deb's really kind of gone over, what AT is, who is eligible, some important considerations. And now I'm going to talk about how to apply for AT at Northeastern and how to maintain status when you're on AT. So this is just an overview, a flowchart of the AT application timeline. So really the first thing that you're going to be doing, obviously, is applying to jobs for after your graduation after you complete your program, because you need to have a job to apply for AT. So fingers crossed, everything goes well with your job search. You receive and you've accepted a job offer that's related to your field of study. You will then need to gather materials that you'll need to apply for post-AT, and we're going to go over that in some more detail in the next few slides, because you will need those documents to show that you're eligible and that the job is eligible for applying for AT. So you'll then submit the AT request to our office as early as possible. So as soon as you've got those documents, you should start working on your AT request to us. And it has to be done before your program ends on your DS 2019. So at least 2 weeks prior to your DS 2019 end date. Please do not leave it till the day before you start working, because it just won't be enough time for our office to review and process that for you. So the sooner the better, so that you can be all ready to go. So once you have submitted the e-form to our office, it will firstly go to your secondary approver, which we're going to explain who that is shortly. They are going to initially do a review and approve the AT request. Once that's happened, it will get automatically routed back to our office, and we will kind of do the final review and the final approval and granting that AT for you. And again, this does need to be approved before your DS 2019 end date. Once your DS 2019 has ended, we can no longer add that AT to your record and extend your program. So very important that you're doing this early. Once we've done that, you're going to receive a copy of your updated DS 2019. That will be done through email, and you'll be then ready to get started with your work. And as Deb said, your employment must begin within 30 days of your DS 2019 program end date. You cannot start working until that day has arrived. So just if you receive your DS 2019, say 2 weeks before your job starts, you can't start working until the date that's listed on your DS 2019. Next slide. Okay, so I talked about the materials that you'll need to submit your request to us for post-AT. So you will need to upload a copy of your passport. That needs to be valid at least 6 months into the future at all times. You'll also need to upload a copy of your most recent I-94. So that's the one you get from the government website. You've probably done that already. But if you have done a new entry into the US, you'll need to retrieve the latest copy of that. We really need to be checking that you have J-1 as the class of admission, and that you've been admitted until DS, which is duration of status. You'll then also need to provide and upload a copy of your job offer letter. This needs to be on company letterhead, and it needs to kind of clearly explain the employment start and end date, the hours you'll be working per week, if you're paid, how much, and the address of where you'll be doing that employment. One thing to note, because we are going to be extending your DS 2019 while you're on your AT, you therefore have to show that you have the minimum, required financial amount to remain in the US to support yourself. So if the salary you're receiving on AT is less than $2,334 a month, you will need to provide additional financial documents to meet the Department of State's minimum funding requirement. Next slide. So how to submit your AT request. It's all done electronically, like everything else in our office. You'll need to begin by logging into your MyOGS portal with your Northeastern credentials, and you'll need to navigate to the AT authorization request e-form. You'll then need to upload and complete the e-form accurately. Make sure you double check it, don't rush it. Upload those documents that I just explained. And you'll also be asked to write a detailed explanation, so at least 1 or 2 sentences, of how your AT is relating to your field of study. So that's how we make sure that you're not just working at McDonald's. Has to be something related to your field, as Deb explained. So you'll need to write a brief but detailed explanation there. You'll also need to enter your academic advisor's email address in the advisor routing section. And so this is when the flowchart explained the secondary approver. Depending on if you're a BSIB student or a GEO student, you'll need to enter one of those email addresses for your advisor, and it's going to go to them first to review. Once they've reviewed it, as I explained, it's going to come back to OGS. So make sure you type their email address in correctly. If you type it in incorrectly, they're never going to receive your e-form, and it will kind of just get lost in our system. So make sure that you enter those emails correctly. Next slide. Okay, so once you've submitted that e-form to us, like I said, it's going to go to a secondary approver to review first. It will then come back to OGS. Probably Deb or I will be reviewing that for you. If everything looks good, we'll be adding the AT to your CVIS record. And here you can see an example DS 2019, and you can see circled in green is where the academic training will populate on your DS 2019. So it's got that start and end date, and it will have, I believe, the employer name for the academic training. And once you receive this, you receive it through email. You need to go over that, have a look, make sure all the details are correct. If they're not correct, you need to reach out to us immediately so that we can correct it for you. So you're going to receive that DS 2019. You'll also receive a new travel validation on page 1. We'll do that every time we update your DS 2019. And you'll also receive a AT authorization letter from Deb or I, and that's required for the I-9 verification for any paid employment. Next slide. Okay, so you've got your job offer, you've submitted the e-form, you've received your DS 2019, you're ready to start working. So obviously during AT, you're still in J-1 status. So how do you maintain your J-1 status whilst you're on AT? Well, as Deb briefly mentioned already, you must maintain health insurance that meets the J-1 requirements for yourself and any J-2 dependents if you have them for the entire duration of the academic training period. That's really important. You should always make sure that your passport is valid at least 6 months into the future. And a note about remote work, the Department of State does not permit 100% remote work. So they are a little bit flexible. So you can work remotely no more than 40% of the time. So in a standard 5-day work week, you can do 2 days remote, but those other 3 days must be at the employer's location in person. An important reminder regarding extensions. If you are seeking an extension of your AT authorization with a new employer, so say you finish that original AT period of time and then you get a new offer with a new employer, you need to submit a whole new academic training request. You can't just submit kind of an update to that previous one if it's with a new employer. And I'll go over that in the next slide a bit more. You also have to update us of any changes to your AT, the dates change, if they get shortened, if they lengthen, if the location changes, if the employer's company name changes, anything like that. Next slide. Okay, so if anything changes on AT, you do have to let us know. Some examples of that are date, location, and the employer, because the AT that we authorize is specific to those things in your CVIS record. So if any of that changes, you must let us know. And we have a different e-form for this, and it's called the AT updates request. You can find that again in your MyOGS portal. So for example, as I've mentioned, if you're shortening your AT, if you're extending it with your current employer, the same employer, if you're changing your start date, perhaps your start date gets pushed back, if you're having additional training days, anything like that, changes to your current employer can be updated through the AT update request e-form. So really important that you make those changes as soon as they happen. Next slide. Okay, and finally, per the Department of State federal regulation, Northeastern University, as your J-1 program sponsor, we must evaluate the effectiveness and appropriateness of the academic training in achieving the stated goals and objectives in order to ensure the quality of the academic training program. So all J-1 students on academic training must submit an academic training AT evaluation e-form at the following times. So if you do change employers, if you get a new AT opportunity, you need to submit the evaluation form for the employer you are leaving. And as I just explained, you would then have to submit a new AT request for that new employer. Or just at the end of your AT period, if you just do one period of AT, you need to submit the evaluation e-form at the end. Next slide. Okay, if you travel while on AT, obviously this is very common. You might want to use some vacation time that your employer gives you. One thing to note is that we do not recommend traveling internationally after your DS 2019 program end date until you've received your updated DS 2019 with the AT authorization. So while you're in that limbo period of, let's say you've completed your program, you've submitted your AT request to us, and you're just waiting for that DS 2019 to be sent to you, don't travel during that time because you're going to need the new DS 2019. You also need to check that you have the valid travel validation on your DS 2019 before you travel internationally. And those validations the travel signatures are valid for 6 months. And we have linked the website here for you, the international travel webpage. That's got loads of information on it. So if you ever travel internationally, we recommend that you check that every time before you travel for any changes. The other link here is the Northeastern's travel registry, where you can log your travel, your upcoming travel, and then we kind of know what flight you're on, etc. Next slide, I believe that might be the last one. Okay, yeah, so that's everything about AT. We're just going to put this slide up here with our contact information if you want to note any of this down. Again, we have put all these links in the chat for you. And we're going to leave some time now. If you do have any questions about AT, you can use the Q&A feature, and we will answer those as best we can. So I'm just going to go on mute now. I'll have a look at those. Okay, we'll keep giving you some time. If you've got any questions, keep throwing them in the Q&A for us. If you don't think of any questions right now, but if you think of something in a few weeks when you're kind of going through the process of applying to AT, you can reach out to us through those contact methods we listed. If you've got any